I really believe that people don't change until they want to do it for themselves. I mean, I think we can do a little bit here and there when like there's outside consequences, or the kids, I want to do it for the kids or my parents or my husband or wife, whoever. I think people can like have little periods, but to really have long-term, happy, healthy, substantial change is, like you said, when it came from deep within, I want to. Is there really a different positive way of life that I could see realistically?
Thanks for tuning in to the Elevation Recovery Podcast, your hub for addiction recovery strategies, hosted by Chris Scott and Matt Finch.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Elevation Recovery Podcast. Today we have a cool guest. He is a rising YouTube star and influencer, Kyle from Soberdogs. Thanks for being with us.
Awesome. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So I was on your YouTube channel last week, I think it was, and I felt like we had a really good chat. And I feel like we're very much in alignment in some ways, although some people might point to me having a somewhat unorthodox, esoteric recovery philosophy. And you might fall a little more squarely into the 12-step than I would. But, I spent about 6 or 8 months falling pretty squarely into that system. And I feel like it's all about interpretation, and I can get on board with certain interpretations of that, and I can't get on board with others. But before we delve into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you were introduced to alcohol, how it became a problem for you?
Sure. Alcohol for me, as soon as I was able to have that first drink, I was about 13. I was in Myrtle Beach with a buddy of mine, and we hung out with a bunch of girls from our hometown, which is Rochester, New York, the night before. And it was just, as you can imagine, 13-year-olds, anxiety, flirting, blah, blah, blah. The next night we got some alcohol, and I just remember all that, whatever was there the night before wasn't there. And I was like, wow, I get why adults use this, why people do this in social settings. And that's where, I can go in that argument of if it's genetic, if what's there with the genes. But I firmly believe at that point is where my brain probably clicked a little bit further than maybe the average person, to where it was, boom, something to quiet the self-imposed expectations and anxiety and everything. Because I had a great upbringing. I know you mentioned that when we did a video a couple weeks ago. Same thing, awesome family, great support. It was all in my own head. But after that point, it was like, whatever I could do to escape that for a little bit, let's go. And that point on, 13 to 15, 16, it wasn't, like a habit or an addiction, but definitely took off more than the average person around me. And I always kept outside things in check, though, which, at the time being made it look decent or good or not as bad as it really was. But internally, or maybe in the long run, prolonged it or hurt it a little bit more, depending on how people want to look at it. Because I did well in sports, I did well in school, I had an outside job, so the appearance looked great. But yet from 15 to 21, 22, it just always progressed up. Other substances, alcohol was always the core, more and more and more tolerance, and just turned into a tornado.
Do you think there was a point at which you realized that it was becoming a problem, or was it so imperceptible to you that by the time it became sort of omnipresent in your life, you just already taken it for granted and didn't question it?
I think a little bit of both. I had consequences pretty young. I got a DWI at 16, which should have been a red flag. I didn't even have my license a week. And that was I got in trouble. I had to do some outpatient at that point. So there were seeds planted and people telling me, that's not normal. 16-year-olds don't drink that much, things like that. But as I said a minute ago, with the outside things going well, and also I surrounded myself with my core group of buddies. It was about 9 of us. Unfortunately, almost every one of them is either active alcoholic, recovering alcoholic, or addict in some type of program. So I looked to the left and right of me, drinking pretty much the same as me in comparison. But when you look back on it, us group of guys were drinking way more than anybody else our age. So it was a little bit of both. There'd be periods, a couple of weeks, a month or so, where like, okay, maybe there is something to this. Maybe I do drink too much. Maybe I do use other stuff too much. But then it would always subside very quickly, because at that age, it was always a different, something else always caused the problems. Maybe I drink a little bit more than average, but that cop was in the wrong spot. We got in a fight because this guy's a dummy. We did, it was always an outside, someone else's fault. It never clicked.
So at what point did you start trying to do something about it?
I did a lot of rehabs, outpatient, and had to go to groups and things like that. But I never took it seriously until other substances really just derailed my life. And I ended up doing a total of 4 years in prison in New York State. And that was a big wake-up call. Prior to that was a huge destruction tornado period with opioids, heroin, Oxycontin, all that. I knew at the core I was a disaster, just total destruction and destroyed everything around me. But I was not ready to do anything different or change. And my first year of prison, I did this exact same thing. This old timer guy came up to me and he was like, "What are you going to do when you get out?" And I was like, "I'm going to be sober. I'm going to, rebuild relationships, all this stuff." And he's like, "No, you're not." And I was ready to fight him. I was like, "What are you talking about? Asshole, you're going to tell me that?" And he's like, "Look what you're doing here. You're running around getting high every day." Unfortunately, there was plenty of stuff in there, alcohol included. And he was dead right. There was no magic rainbow. But after that first year, the consequences in there caught up with me. And out of my last 2.5 years, I ended up spending over a year in solitary confinement, all for drug use.
Whoa.
Yeah, that was never have I experienced a deeper hell than solitary confinement. It was just absolutely crippling in every aspect of it. And that was really the first time I thought maybe I could try something different. And that's when a lot of those seeds that have been planted years prior came out a little bit, and I was willing to try different things after I got released. Wow.
That's actually, I don't know that I've talked to anyone who's been in solitary confinement. I know some people who have gone to prison, but that seems like the worst hell. I mean, I've just heard things about it, but it's interesting to me, the way you phrased that was that it's not that the punishment of solitary confinement forced your brain to do something whereby you said, all right, the punishment's too bad, we're done. You still had to decide for yourself what you wanted to do once you were out of there, right? So you had to change your belief system and visualize a world that looked better than the one that you had. It wasn't just, obviously pain plays a role in decisions, negative consequences play a role, costs play a role, but you still probably had to enable yourself to see something on the, in a bright picture of a future that's possible. Is that right?
Yeah. And I don't know if, so I want to be pretty clear on this. Solitary, that the way it was explained, the pain of it, there's little periods where I would think of different ways and stuff, but solitary did absolutely nothing in any aspect of the way to change me or help think a different way. It created tons of permanent issues that do nothing but deteriorate and not help. But just having all that time to sit there is when those little seeds would plant, but they're filled with just so much suicidal thoughts and depression that it's just drowned it. What really changed was, so I ended up getting out, released from solitary and prison. And I'd go to a couple meetings and I'd talk to a couple people in recovery, but then I started getting high again and drinking. And I got rearrested and they sentenced me to this, it's called Willard. It's like a prison boot camp for parolees in New York State, based on military boot camp up at 5:30 a.m. Yeah, big nose Italian, give me 50, all that. And while I was waiting to go there in the county jail, I had a phone call with my parents that just, for the people that believe in the rock bottom, that was it. That I'd never heard the tone of voice they were talking to me in. It wasn't upset, mad at me, lecturing. It was like they basically were mentally preparing for their son to be dead soon. And it was like this detached, weird feeling that just crushed me. And then at the end of that boot camp thing, they brought in some guys from a local AA meeting who spoke. And for the first time, I saw a guy share his story who was sitting where I was sitting a decade earlier, who had a big smile on his face, who I could relate to. And that was really the moment where I was like, okay, the parole officers, the guards, the rehab counselors can all tell me stuff, but that guy lived it and he's smiling. Maybe there's a different way. And after that time, when I got out, I really jumped into recovery and tried other people's way. Change, like you said, change that belief system, or just kind of scrap my old one and be open to whatever a different one was. It wasn't necessarily mine. It was, who's doing something positive around me? Let me fill it in and see what I could, remold here.
Yeah, when I quit, I didn't have nearly as intensive a situation as you did at that point in time, which is interesting because most people, when I talk about my rock bottom, I'm saying I was in a lot worse shape than you were. But in this case, you were in a lot worse shape than I was. And I went to some meetings. I didn't find anyone that they always say there are different types of meetings in different places. Mm-hmm. I didn't find anyone that inspired me, but I did realize that by opening my mind and just trying something else and not being so rigid, I felt like I'd been compulsively rigid my entire life and very stubborn. I've always been very independent. I've had like a strong nonconformist streak my whole life. And I didn't give that up necessarily, but in terms of not being a compulsive drunk, I wanted to try something else. Like maybe I can just latch on to something else for a while, see if it works, because my way wasn't working. Mm-hmm. And by opening my mind, it enabled me to let go, and it was freeing. Yeah. And I actually got some periods of, even before biochemical stability, which for me, most people who are listening will know supplementation was extremely important for me. My brain was all sorts of messed up. Some people seem to be able to use diet and exercise to do biochemical repair, but I think they have to eat pretty well and it takes a longer time. So, but even before I found that, there was glimmers of hope and glimmers of euphoria that I would get just by knowing that I had the ability to change my paradigm and that I wasn't actually an automaton stuck in my own rigid compulsions. Does any of that relate to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I probably, when I hear you talk about that, I probably was more, I don't know if willing's the word, but I accepted their stance or philosophy a lot quicker. But what that kind of reminds me of too is something I loved a lot. Somebody taught me is they're like, when you go to a meeting, a recovery place, whatever, it's take what applies and let the rest fly. You might hear 40 minutes of something that you have no idea, and then 20 minutes that relates and take that. That's what I definitely took to right away, but also was kind of so destroyed that I did just totally accept their paradigm, their belief system, and let it run. I was kind of like, I'll give it a chance. I'll give it, 6 months, whatever the case is, but I will be completely open to whatever suggestions are made. But I could definitely relate to that I guess, I don't know, stubborn comes to mind, but listening to another person's way, or like just giving up that self-control that we're kind of taught our whole lives of, like, I think especially for men, it's like push through it. Hard work can fix it. There's got to be a logical answer that I could write down, look at and say, boom, I do that and I'm fixed. And that was the kind of the hardest part, to accept the process of everything, and a daily work through, and all of that combined was how it really came to be.
Yeah, there's a bunch of paradoxical things that I found to be true, such as letting go can actually make you stronger. And I love the books, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. Those are books that I would not have read if I had not gone through what I'd gone through. I would have had no reason to. I would have put them in the category of all self-help books. I used to think self-help books were for idiots, just couldn't figure things out for themselves. And now I love self-help books. I'm a proud fan of that whole genre. But yeah, it's very interesting. And talking to you, by the way, I grew up in northern New Jersey. So all of my friends in high school were either Italian or Irish. And so you remind me of some of the guys that I would have hung out with then.
Yeah.
And actually, I spent some time in Rochester and upstate New York in my 20s. So, how long ago, if you don't mind me asking, did the worst pass for you? How long have you been on this adventure?
So I got released that second time. I just mentioned, when that guy came in and spoke, and I decided to jump into recovery. That was August of 2017. So since then, I've been on the journey of recovery and finding whatever. I am a big 12-step person. I go to a lot of meetings and I work the program. But what has been truly like just total world changing for me, I can't think of the words coming to mind, is the people that I've met there, all the different outside things they do as well. Something that when I first was talking to you, this kept just ringing in my head. These three people here in Rochester started a place called Recovery Fitness, where basically they went through a lot of 12-step meetings. They enjoyed it, but they were all in their 30s, extremely active people. The one guy is a Iraq vet. I think he did 2 or 3 tours. And they were like, we just want a place for people in recovery to go and do active things, workout, hike, bike, kayak, whatever. Now they have this entire old firehouse was donated to them, where there's free yoga, weights, kettlebell training, boxing. They got pool table, ping pong, if you just want to go hang out. But I never would have met them and gotten involved if it wasn't for meeting those people, a 12-step meeting. Through them, they do other stuff that isn't 12-step related of recovery, but it's blossomed and branched out. And that reminded me a lot of what you do with the Fit Recovery, and kind of taking that, sitting in a chair at a 12-step meeting, which I love, I do almost daily, but bringing a different part into it too, with the connecting with people, and then the exercise and the rebuilding and the endorphins, everything going on when you're working out. So that was truly too changed my recovery.
Yeah, well, that's really cool. And I totally agree with you, by the way. Take what helps you, discard what doesn't help you. I tell people that who join my online course, I kind of present my philosophy of recovery, but that's an optimization and life. But I don't expect everyone to subscribe to my beliefs. I'm not trying to create some kind of dogma. And so I took some things like the serenity prayer. I'm actually a big fan of. I think that's a phenomenal way to delineate between what you can control and what you can't, and what you should stay focused on and what you shouldn't. And, we feel what we focus on. That's a Tony Robbins quote. That's one of my favorites. So that to me meant, let's not ruminate on things I can't control and, torture myself. Let's think about what I can and try to expand my sphere of influence and become a better person over time and become a happier person over time. But yes, obviously I'm totally on board with everything you said about fitness. That's a really cool group. Are they national or are they local?
No, I'm pretty sure they're just local. I think Rochester, and they branched out a little bit, maybe Buffalo or the southern tier of New York. But I know they're trying to, expand or get groups to pop up in other cities.
That's cool. I actually went to a
Yeah.
rock climbing gym in Atlanta shortly after I quit drinking, and it was a lot of fun. I went a couple times. I ended up moving from Atlanta, but that was one of the things. I had a giant list of things to do after I quit drinking. So I was like, I've been confining myself. Like, alcohol is a very confining substance. It's like, how many nights have I thought I had a good time, but I was in my living room, drinking a couple 40s or bottles of expensive red wine or vodka or whatever it was. I thought I was having a blast, but I wasn't. And I was just poisoning my liver, and I was fantasizing about all these cool things I'd do. So it was like, now it's time to actually do some cool stuff. So I had rock climbing gym. I had go to this river where we used to go tubing drunk. I think I drank like a large portion of a 30 rack of beers while floating down this river. So I wanted to do that without alcohol, and it was actually more fun. I noticed the trees and stuff. Didn't feel like I was going to drown by the time I got out. And so that was one of the things. But yeah, there's just an infinite number of things. For anyone who thinks that there's nothing they'd be interested in doing after alcohol or drugs, I can tell you pretty much that's a delusion. And imagination is the key to that problem. But also getting in with a community of people who want to do it helps a lot. And you get the oxytocin boost along with the endorphin boost that you get. You seem like you're pretty into fitness as well. So is that something that you what kind of fitness do you like to do?
I do all, whatever, pretty much. Currently, I go to the gym almost daily. I'm one of those people too that we kind of briefly talked about it the other day. If I don't get like some type of sweat during the day, I feel like, like the day's not accomplished or something didn't happen. So, which I know isn't great with rest days, but I go pretty much daily and do, weights and cardio mixed by myself. And then I add in during the week, with that group, when they do yesterday, I did a class there. It was just, like 8 or 9 people of basically like high intense stations, from squat thrusts to wall ball throws and all that. And then there's always random things. We live near the water, so I go kayaking. I went rock climbing with my father and 2 of my cousins a couple weeks ago. And I did jujitsu last year for about 7 months. I liked it a lot. And then I pulled my hip flexor pretty bad. And so I took a little bit off and then psyched myself kind of out of going back, just because I didn't really get very far in that period and got my ass kicked a lot. So it's on my list of getting back in there now, because I definitely enjoyed it. So almost, anything and everything I'm ready for. And it was very funny when you just mentioned too about thinking that sitting at home was fun during that, drinking. That was my biggest fear. I could say 1000% before I was thinking about trying something different or getting sober. All the real changes of family and you're going to be dead if you keep, shooting drugs and drinking. That was very real. But at the same time, the biggest part was what am I going to do sober? I had every event, everything from morning coffee to, vacation or whatever. Drugs and alcohol were a focal point. So to not have that, I was just, life is going to be miserable. And it has been the furthest thing from the truth. And the vast majority of the time I was either blacked out, don't remember, couldn't do the actual event because alcohol took over and drugs took over. So if it was something fun like kayaking or rock climbing or whatever, I'd make it 50 feet and end up giving up with the group or whatever. So all those times my brain told me it was fun, it was a disaster. And like you said, floating down that river sober, now that I get to go do those things, it is so much better. It's incredible. And that is one of the biggest lies that I told myself for years, that life would suck without drugs and alcohol. And that was one of the hardest beliefs to change. But it has, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely crucial. I remember when I was in the detox center, getting off my benzodiazepine taper so I wouldn't have a seizure. I remember asking these people if life got better. And I guess I got a sort of depressed crop of alumni that came back to the rehab center, and they were basically, no, it doesn't. It's a struggle. It sucks. And I was like, well, then why aren't you drinking? You know,
Exactly.
like, it sounds taboo, but seriously, why aren't you drinking if that's the best possible outcome? So it seems to me like we don't do things that we can't A, visualize, or B, imagine has some sort of positive benefit for us that's better than whatever the alternative is.
Sure.
And so, as you said, all of the negative consequences in the world, they can be downright horrible. You might die, your family's going to disown you. Who knows? Girls are going to break up with you, or all these things. You might lose your job, be homeless. All those things could be like specters looming in on your life. And yet, if you can't visualize an alternative, you're not going to do the alternative. It's kind of as simple as that. You're just not going to, right?
That's a great point.
A simple thing is like, let's say I really, this is stupid, but let's say like I'm out of food in my house, but I really can't imagine. I just can't imagine going to the store. I've never imagined it. I'm going to be out of food and I might starve to death. You know, like that's seriously. And so it doesn't matter like what the negative consequences are. If you can't picture yourself doing something and have some kind of benefit, you know, it's like oftentimes I might not see the immediate benefit in finishing my set of deadlifts or continuing to fight my way up out of a rear naked choke when I'm at MMA. It just seems like I'm in hell. This sucks. Let's let it end. But really, I can visualize how I'm going to proceed, even if I don't love what it looks like. And it's a means to an end. And I can see the benefit of it. I'm going to get better. I'm going to get stronger. And so it just seems like in everything, including in the long-term saga of substance use, if we can't picture something that's an alternative that's viable, then we're just not going to do it. And it's a tragic thing because you see people, you can imagine being in the position of a spouse or parents or whoever, children, saying, you don't love me enough to change your life. And oftentimes that's not the case. It's not the case. It's that it's a belief system issue. And specifically they might love you plenty, but they can't visualize or picture, or for whatever reason, they have limiting beliefs that keep them from thinking that they can actually do what it is that you think is consistent with what they should do if they did in fact love you. And so that's actually a topic I've been meaning to talk about for some time, but you can probably, it sounds like you have experience with that given the tone of your family when you finally quit.
Yeah. You said it great, 1,000%. And, we were talking on the last video too, about even something like, when you were mentioning jumping in the cold shower or the sauna, and, you were like, I'll tell myself heat shock proteins, and even a situation like that. But that's so true with anything. I'll sit down to write an article. Sometimes I'm like, oh, it's going to be a pain in the ass. I don't like write. And I know it's going to be terrible. But if I reframe it and talk different about it, I'm getting better. My typing's getting quicker, and that was absolutely true during addiction. Every time I did something, I remember specifically, like my mom's is a waitress. She works at restaurants her whole life, and she'd come home like at midnight, and I would know she had tips, and I'd steal it, and I'd go out and get a drug. I'd be sitting there in withdrawal all day waiting for this. I could not bring my phone with me when I left the house because of the guilt of just looking at or seeing her name, her picture. I knew I was going to get the call. I knew I was going to get screamed at. That's a more extreme example, but like I had nothing but love and want to do the best for her and everything. I just knew no opposite, whether it's alcohol or something different. It's like my brain and body are screaming, if you don't get this, you're going to die. You're going to go into withdrawal. You're going to have all these extreme consequences. Go get it regardless of the consequences. Couple hours of numbness, and then all that guilt just comes crashing back. And when it does, the only thing I knew how to do at that point, and probably many of us, what gets rid of the guilt? Get high again, get drunk again. And it's that evil cycle. But the friends and family that don't know might just, yeah, exactly. Why won't you change? How come you can't do this for us? And it's just like, that's the hardest thing to explain to somebody. I knew no other way. I didn't know any possible different outcome to numb or cope or anything at that point in time. And that I could see too how hard that is for people on the outside looking in. If you take it personal, it's going to feel like a personal attack. Like you clearly don't want to change for me, for mom, for grandma, for your wife, for whoever. And it's not, like I wish I could convey that to people more. At the same time, that person still has to have their self-accountability at some point in time to decide to take a different way.
Right. And that's key. They have to decide. It has to come from within, because the answer to, well, if I were the spouse, or if I were the parents or the kids, I'd say, well, here, let me map out the alternative for you. And unfortunately, that doesn't work. Other people can't think for you. Other people can't change your beliefs. They can sometimes play a role, but you have to take the initiative to do it. And I say initiative might be the wrong word, because I thought I was a bad person during my drinking years, but in retrospect, I wasn't bad. I hadn't figured out how to dissolve that programming that made me think that my only option all the time was to drink. I'm sure if I had been locked in prison, I would have felt, and I'm lucky that I never got a DUI or DWI, but had I would have felt coerced into quitting. When I quit for once and for all and decided, this is it, that was like a sacred, deep internal decision that could not have been commanded to me by some higher authority in society, or even my parents or people who I loved. It just doesn't work that way. And sometimes that creates problems, because when you feel like you're coerced, it adds to the resentment. And then you go back to the only thing you know. So, it can seem very mysterious and baffling why people put themselves seemingly voluntarily through so much pain. And then, of course, there's the brain disorder or disease or whatever debate and explanation for that. There's the biochemical imbalances explanation. But I think the beliefs also play a huge role. And so I stress, if you come at this from a beliefs perspective, whatever your philosophy is, and from a biochemical healing perspective, you maximize your odds of ultimately successfully deciding to change. Because it's easy when you're in a state of dealing with negative consequences to say, I swear to God, this is it. But how many times have we done that?
This is the last time.
Yeah, this is the last time. This is it. But when you do that, you're not in a place where you can actually accurately map out the alternative. You're just in intense pain, which is great and can spark change. But it's not a complete formula for sparking change. You also need that positive visual, something that excites you. And so for me, it took a long time to figure out what could excite me. And the pain played a role. The costs played a role. But in my case, I was so secretive about my drinking and successful in hiding it from most people that I didn't need to have external pressure. I was terrified I was just going to get cirrhosis and die. And so that led me to start exploring, being open to other possibilities. And being open to other people's philosophies and read books and figure out how might I live my life. And that was I often say my life's purpose in early recovery was to figure out what the hell my life's purpose might be, because I knew it wasn't drinking, but I knew it involved open-mindedness and learning and trying to help people. And I knew that I couldn't do any of those things if I was enslaved by a toxic substance that was killing me.
Yep. That's very true. And I've heard it in 12-step areas, but I firmly believe it. And you just nailed on it for a couple minutes, is I really believe that people don't change until they want to do it for themselves. I think we can do a little bit here and there when there's outside consequences, or the kids, I want to do it for the kids or my parents or my husband or wife, whoever. I think people can have little periods, but to really have long-term, happy, healthy, substantial change is, like you said, when it came from deep within, I want to. And I've never thought about it the way you just explained about the visualization of, it makes total sense. I just never thought about it that way of is there really a different positive way of life that I could see realistically? Because that's extremely hard to see that, especially when there's a mountain of disaster in 10 different areas of your life. It could feel like whether I actually put a video up on social media the other day about like people going through detox or withdrawal, and what makes it different than like the flu or something is, there might be mountains of credit card debt, police parole after you, relationships destroyed, family disowned you. Like there's all this mental burden too, to where seeing that positive life can be very hard at that time. But it's that slow process of just worry about what we can worry about and change today, and tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for anyone who thinks that change can be coerced, they should reflect on the fact that you spent a year in solitary confinement and it still didn't change you.
I got high in solitary confinement.
Like, all right. Yeah, exactly. And then again, when you got out, it had to be a personal change. So yeah, we have all sorts of visualizations. Like I have visualizations of things I'm going to do later today. But for me, when I was drinking, it was like, oh, like these are the neural pathways, right? So you have a flicker of like walking into the liquor store and getting your favorite thing and walking out and then home and opening the bottle, then you get a dopamine surge. So that's like a neural pathway, right? But it's also a visualization. You get anticipatory dopamine surging in response to that. And if your life is a series, and if your neural pathways are just a series of alcohol-related events and visualizations, it's very hard to imagine anything else. So that's why you have to start accumulating new experiences with a new mindset, and hopefully and increasingly balancing biochemistry over time in order to pave over those neural pathways and start imagining different courses of action. Because right now, I was telling a private client the other day on the phone, and we were talking about numbing ourselves out. And I said, look, I'm not a better person than you. I still numb myself out. I go to the sauna, or I go to the steam room and I stay in there until my skin crawls. And then I pull on the chain so that the ice cold water comes out. And I'm like, oh, I'm all numbed out. And I'll do that back and forth for 40 minutes sometimes. And I drive home like I'm on a cloud. It's probably not that dissimilar of a physical experience from when I was drinking, 2 bottles of red wine because I had a bad day at work. Very similar mental state, similar thing. I have a coping mechanism. Just this one doesn't destroy me. It actually builds me up, and it works a lot better. And I wish I'd known about it back then. So, that's all this is, a series of neural pathways. If we can find things that actually serve us instead of destroy us, then that's really the key. But I think it's inspiring. I think it's going to be inspiring to people who hear this. They've been listening to me say that life is better without alcohol. But to hear you say it as well, especially after all of your experiences, I think that's going to be really cool.
Yeah. Oh, it absolutely is. To me, it's just, there's so many little gifts too that I start or have seen randomly throughout the time in recovery that are just priceless, that I never thought of or even visualized prior. Sick family member. I had a sick family member about a year ago, and I was like the point person to help them, and everyone trusted me. And I sat back one day, I was talking to a friend, and they're like pointing it out, so to speak. And, it was just like the years prior, no one even wanted me close around because something would have went missing. I would have shown up as all these things. And like, it's a good feeling to be responsible. And then, go on these, me and my mom are like, nature partners. We go do stuff out and all these fun things, whatever. She's down, I'm down. Me and my dad do different things, whether it's the gym and like all these little things that never happened before that are great experiences that I have the ability now to stop and be like, that was an awesome day. Holy crap. And before it was just a blur, like you said, it was drunk before. Alcohol, the whole plan was how can alcohol be involved in whatever the event is the whole day, and which meant by 3-4 o'clock, it's a blackout or a nap or this or that or other substances to get the energy to get through it. And then what was accomplished? Nothing. It was just a blur of disaster. 1000% life is substantially better on so many different levels.
Yeah, well said. When you had emailed me initially, I saw your YouTube channel. It looked a little familiar, but I love how you brought dogs into the into the theme. I guess. And I introduced my dogs on our YouTube video. And so how did that idea come up for you?
Dogs have been, I am a huge animal lover, all animals, but dogs specifically. They just, even during like the, destruction at the worst days, one thing that always brought me 5, 10, whatever minutes of peace is sitting with the dogs and just petting them. And I felt like they understood me and I understood them to an extent. It just was pure bliss with them always. And so even like in prison, everyone had like a whiteboard, I don't know, 4 foot by 2 foot that you were allowed to put your personal photos on. And I had a couple pictures of the family and, my girlfriend at the time and this and that, but mostly dogs. And it was just that brought happiness. So I figured what better than to say, Soberdogs. And a couple people too would call me the Soberdogs. It was like, Kyle's always with the dog. He's always got the dogs around. He's driving around, the dog's with him. And I actually don't have a dog at the moment. My girl Morgan, we put down about 1.5 years ago. She's a 14-year-old Rottweiler mix, and my parents' dog still there, but I moved out of their house, last 9-10 months ago. So I'm working on it. I want to get another one so bad. It's just a time, it's not fair to them if I'm gone 8-9 hours a day. So I'm working on an answer to that, but very soon I'll have another one here.
Yeah. Well, I'm partial to my 2 pit bull mixes.
Yeah.
And the first one I adopted, I was told he was a lab Ridgeback mix. And I mean, I didn't care. I just loved his face. I show up to adopt him and he's got a toy in his mouth already. He's like kind of like jacked, but really friendly as well. I was like, That's my dog. I'm leaving with him. They're like, you're taking him today? I'm like, I'm taking him now. Like, I don't want anyone else to see this dog. So I had, adopted him. And then I purposefully wanted to get another pit bull mix. I just love those dogs. I feel I'm protective of all dogs now. I mean, I had a wonderful golden retriever growing up. I was young and I was 8 years old when I got her and I had no idea how to train her. So now I have a lot of fun with the dog. So I recommend to anyone listening to loneliness is obviously a huge problem with recovery and also with, the post-pandemic life, which seems to be dragging on. So go to your shelter, find a cute dog, maybe a pit bull mix or Rottweilers I love as well. Both my dogs have a little bit of Rottweiler in them as well. For some reason, I'm drawn to these big, allegedly vicious dogs, which I'm sure can be very powerful and dangerous with the wrong training and the wrong background. But I mean, both of my dogs were strays. One of them might have been used to breed fighting dogs, and yet sweetest little lap dog you'll ever see. I'm sure if someone broke into my house, they would think differently. But that's cool. I'll take that too.
Yeah, you said it. I mean, the background and the training and how they're raised is so much of it. Yeah. All the dogs we've ever gotten are from the shelter and a year of love and proper discipline, not beating them and things like that. Just the training discipline, the good ways. They're the most loving dogs. I for a kind of a side gig right now, a good friend of mine, she's a nurse and she's gone all day and she's got a 100-pound pit bull, and this thing is just a brick walking down the street. And I mean, he is the nicest, most submissive dog. 12, 13-pound poodles come up and he's on his back playing with them. Right. And I just love to see that because it does renew the faith in the dogs. And he's been with her since he was 1. He's 13 now, never shown aggression to anybody. And it's all how they're raised.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, as soon as I get home, I sit on my couch and I have one head here and one head there, just snouts looking at me like, how did I ever not have this? It's
I know,
the coolest thing. People say the same thing about kids, but I'm not there yet. So we'll see.
Me neither. I don't know yet.
Well, Kyle, this has been I feel like we could talk for hours and I'm sure we'll have you back on again, but where can people find you if they want to listen to or watch your videos?
Sure. Pretty much Soberdogs anywhere. YouTube, TikTok, Instagram at Soberdogs and just the number 2. Those YouTube is definitely the most active, YouTube and TikTok and Instagram. Facebook too, but I those are here and there, so to speak. So like you said, I'm trying to work on it and get better, but definitely just type in Soberdogs on YouTube and it pops right up.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show, Kyle. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Chris. And definitely we'll do this again very soon. I thank you for having me on.